let's start with my academic career. I'm a professor of microbiology and public health at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University and in the Department of Microbiology, also at Columbia University. And for about 38 years, I have taught to medical students and students of public health on topics related to my training, of course, and that is in microbiology. So actually, I'm considered one of the few living experts on Trichinella spiralis. I devoted 27 years of my life in the laboratory to working on that worm. And it turns out that Trichinella can teach us a lot of lessons outside the sphere of its own biology. And one of those spheres is how foodborne diseases are transmitted. And so I got involved very early on in my career, being interested not only in the molecular biology of this parasite, but also in terms of the way it spreads from one person to another or to the animals and then back into people. And so I've become an ecologist, basically. And so for the last 10 years of my life, maybe since 1999 until the present, which is a little bit more than 10 years, I've taken another view of the world, and rather than looking through a microscope, I now look through a telescope, and I want to see the broadest picture of the way diseases are transmitted and how to prevent them. And basically, that's how the idea of growing food in tall buildings arose, by thinking of ways of avoiding infections rather than trying to cure them or trying to develop vaccines to prevent them. So we can prevent a lot of things simply by avoiding them. And it turns out that infectious diseases can be avoided if we know a lot about them and if we are careful in the way we behave. So that's my life as a professional microbiologist has taken a very interesting turn in that respect. And it was probably predicated on the fact that sometime in 1998, I received a notice from my granting agency that I was no longer funded for the research that I was doing since 1971. So that was quite a switch for me to actually have to make the jump between the laboratory and the field, so to speak. But that I'm very comfortable in this position that I occupy right now, and I'm having a lot of fun at it, and I hope I will continue to have fun doing what I'm doing now, which is sort of giving a larger picture of the way we can behave in terms of how we produce our food, and how we can lower our impact on the natural world around us and try to restore some of the ecology that we've disturbed by the fact that we need to farm in terms of producing food. The idea itself of growing food in tall buildings actually evolved out of a class that I began teaching in 1999 to sort of fill in the missing time that I was spending in the lab. I was now spending more time in the classroom. And this idea arose almost by accident. I began a course called Medical Ecology, in which I was teaching about the damages we do to the environment and the health risks we create by those damages. Like, for instance, encroaching into a rainforest, and then there are diseases sitting there waiting for us. And we discover them only after we go in and do that to them. For instance, building a road right down the middle of the Amazonian jungle. That resulted in huge numbers of cases of new species of dermal leishmaniasis, which is a disfiguring disease that is transmitted by sandflies, for instance. We've done this all over the world, so the students got very tired of hearing about this about halfway through in 1999 and petitioned me to work on something more uplifting, and they chose rooftop gardening to grow food and to see if they could feed, let's say, Manhattan. Which was just a theoretical construct, of course, but is there enough space on the rooftops of Manhattan, minus the commercial buildings, to grow enough food to feed, let's say, 2.5 million people? And they worked very hard on that project, and at the end of that semester, they concluded, of course, that you can't grow that much food to feed 2.5 million. In fact, you could only feed about 2% of that population with the landmass that rooftops represented. So I, in a moment of desperation, believe me, it was a moment of desperation, I turned to them and said, that's okay, you guys did a great job, and you worked through the problem, you solved it, you got an answer that you didn't like, but you had enough integrity to not try to alter the data in favor of how you wanted it to come out. And what I'll tell you now is that if you took your idea about growing food on the rooftops and moved it inside the same buildings, and there are lots of abandoned buildings in New York City, you could generate huge amounts of land this way compared to the amount of limited land that you've got on a rooftop. Say, for instance, a 6-story building, you'd multiply the ratio of how much food you could grow times 6 just in that one building. And we know how to grow food inside. And we know how to grow lots of other things inside too. Just go up to see the Bronx Botanical Garden, for instance, as a living example of that. You can go around the world and find these botanical gardens in which all of the world's plants, or many of them at least, are kept under protective care in these enclosed facilities. And so why can't we do that with our crops? And, they actually brightened up when I said that, because they were quite depressed by finding out that you can't feed New York City just by growing food on the rooftops. There are a lot of reasons why they couldn't, and one of them was the fact that there are seasons associated with New York and with most other places in the temperate zone world, I should say. Tropical world has a different set of problems, but certainly in the temperate zone world, you've got winter and summer and spring and fall, and that really limits the amount of food you can produce outdoors, no matter whether it's on a rooftop or in the soil. So growing it indoors, where you're protecting it and keeping the conditions basically the same all year round, has virtue. And so we proceeded from that point to develop this concept. And you're right. I mean, in 2003, when we decided to put our findings up on the internet, if you typed out that term, vertical farm, you would have gotten about four hits, maybe 5. And it had nothing to do with what we were doing. And today, if you type out the same term, you'll get something, depends on the time of day that you do it, but I've had as many as 45 million. The intention was from the start to never sequester this idea away and turn it into something commercial for just the few people that knew about this to begin with. So we were always in a mode of putting it up and allowing the world to look at it. And if it's a bad idea, of course, the world will tell you that. They won't pull their punches on that one. They will just say, this is a ridiculous idea. This can never work. This doesn't. And I fully expected a lot of responses like that. But to be very honest, we didn't get many negative responses to the idea. We got a few more negative responses to the designs that were first submitted to the website, because they looked impractical, and they looked like they would use a lot of energy, for instance, and they looked like they would take up a lot of space, and they wouldn't solve the problem of trying to lower our agricultural footprint, by the way, which is about the size of South America right now for 7 billion people. So there is a great need for doing this, and I think the need for doing it is the reason why this idea has resonated so well with a lot of people. And not just young people, also designers. I've had wonderful meetings with mayors of cities and governors of states and heads of architecture firms and design firms. I've had a lot of meetings with the ag people, not necessarily the commercial ag people, but certainly the ag schools. And all of them think that even if it's impractical today, because we're lagging behind in certain technologies, for instance, lighting is a problem that we need to still address and make it more efficient in order for this to become a reality. The fact is that there are examples of vertical farms right now. So it's quite amazing to see how this idea has gone from a classroom to the internet to an expanded viral acceptance of the idea to, in many cases, countries now trying to develop vertical farming using cutting-edge technologies.